I was in a meeting. I'm asking all these questions. It was a meeting. We're really passionate about the topic. It's in my first year. And every single question I asked, the executive that was in the meeting with us, they would respond to my co-fellow and look my co-fellow directly in the face. And he's, white, 10 years older than me, has a clinical background, but they would look him directly in the eye every time, even though I was asking the question. And this is 2019, and I really couldn't believe it. I suffered so much just adjusting to the culture, because I was just like, there's no way that I'm in this position now. Like, and a lot of my professors at Morehouse tried to tell me, like, watch, you're gonna go there and see what happens. And I was like, you guys are wrong. I'm from a really inclusive place. I'm used to this. I can do it. And so it was hard. It was just difficult. And I think you definitely have to have like some steel about you. You have to really be confident in who you are, because I quickly shriveled up. And so I'm all dynamic now and on LinkedIn, and they seem like I'm super active, but there are certain months that I was depressed, man. I didn't think I made the right decision. I was like, wow, this fellowship life is not for me.
This is the Public Health Millennial Career Stories podcast, where you'll hear about diverse career stories, career strategies, get tips, and learn from others to help you in your public health career journey. If you want to learn about public health careers, or just hear public health stories, stay tuned, because you won't want to miss this. Welcome to the Public Health Millennial Career Stories podcast, episode number 34. Hi everyone, Omar Richards here. Happy New Year. Hope everyone's doing well. This is a pretty long episode, but great insights. And I just look forward to having more conversations with this person going on into the future. Definitely tune in. And without further ado, here's today's episode. Enjoy. Today we have a health equity and community empowerment nerd with a passion for learning. He got his Bachelor's of Arts in General Biology at Fisk University, then went on to get his Master of Public Health from Morehouse School of Medicine. He served as the Regional Student Liaison for the American Public Health Association, where he currently sits as a board member for the Education Board for MPH. He was an administrative intern at Duke University, as well as a student volunteer for Atlanta Community Food Bank. He took part in the Emerging Leader Development Program hosted by Focus St. Louis. He is currently a David A. G. Administrative Fellow at the Barnes-Jewish Hospital. We have Winston Wellington Wright, MPH. Welcome to the show, and I'm glad I got that entire thing correct the first time around.
One take, especially my long name. I'm sorry, I should have just scaled it down. I appreciate that, though, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to have you on the podcast today. Like, just in public health in general, I feel like there aren't that many men. And then when you talk about Black men, it's even less than that. So I'm just glad to connect with another Black man in public health. And I'm happy to be able to have the platform to share your story,
Absolutely, man.
So how are you, and how have you been coping during these times?
I'm good. The last year has been very turbulent, I would say the least, for a lot of us. I started off 2020 losing my father, unfortunately. So it was interesting, and then quickly but surely things just kind of, snowballed out of control in terms of COVID-19. But I've been good. I've been good. It's a new year, new me, so to speak. And I've been coping really just the same old basic way. I'm a footballer, soccer fan, so just watching a lot of games, and after that, just chilling with my fiance, talking with my family. That's how I've been coping. Simple kind of stuff.
Okay, condolences on the loss. And I did not know you were a soccer or football fan. That's like all I do, all I watch. What team do you support?
Okay, I might have to end it short. Manchester United, man. I'm a diehard Manchester United fan. Glory, Man U, all the way. That's me. How about you, though?
I'm a Bayern Munich fan, but then I'm an Arsenal fan by extension through my family. Yeah, so it's been a rough season.
Yeah. Most of my friends are Arsenal or Chelsea fans, so I have a lot of fun with you guys. It's funny.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So we can definitely chat about that some more too.
Absolutely, man.
So how do you identify, and then tell us a little bit about your personal background?
Yeah, so Winston, he, him, his. I was originally born in Seattle, Washington, in 1995. So I'm on the cusp between Millennial and Gen Zer. I always say that I am the youngest Millennial, but I'm the oldest Gen Zer. But I really feel like there's no place for us. So it's interesting. But yeah, I was born in Seattle. moved to Philadelphia when I was 8 years old, just turning eight with my family. My father was an educator, so he worked for a lot of big public school districts in multiple cities across the United States, and my mother was an entrepreneur. So I always grew up with kind of this service mindset. Both of my parents also instilled in me just a sense of pride, for our history as Black Americans, our culture, but also a worldview. So I, come from a very integrated, diverse household, but also very proud household. And that just really informed kind of everything I wanted to do after that. Just having both of my parents, seeing them constantly, consistently trying to up, uh, uplift, our communities, just kind of instilled in me that passion for doing the same.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So what does public health mean to you?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because it's so, especially now, right? I feel like we're under a microscope. It's everywhere. Public health. I would say that if I was a superhero, public health would be my superpower, you know? And that's really what it means to me. I think it's a philosophy, it's a science, obviously, of trying to advance the health and well-being of populations in the most granular sense. That's the way that I look at it. And I think that in the American context, public health is still very underappreciated, just like as an art form. And obviously, COVID speaks to that. But there's a lot of things that have changed my worldview of what it is and what it means. I think that 3 years ago when I was a student, I'm still very raw and fresh now, but even more raw and fresher back then. I definitely looked at it as a way to operationalize equity and to fight the social justice warrior fight. Like, oh, this is amazing. But like I said, now I really think it's everything, and I think it encompasses a bunch of different aspects of what we do in our lives. And yeah, so for me, it's my superpower, philosophical tool, weapon, scientific tool, weapon. That's what public health means to me. I won't go on a rant, but
Okay, I love that a lot, and I look forward to hearing like how you discovered public health, because I feel like that is always the question, because no one really knows public health growing up, and they
right.
kind of like fall into it. So you did your bachelor's of arts in general biology at Fisk University. So what was the thought process for getting this?
Yeah, so I was always a science kid, always a science kid. Funny enough, though, I wanted to be an actor growing up. I thought I was going to be in entertainment. But in terms of school, I always loved science. I really love the methodical thought process, just scientific method, researching and being able to ask a question, create something, to do something about the question, to answer it, and then like reviewing your results. That was just a process that I loved. And so by the time that I got to undergrad, I actually was going to go to school for engineering. I was in high school. I got accepted to a bunch of different engineering schools, really big state schools, but I didn't have any funding at all from any of those institutions, or it wasn't enough. My parents were kind of like, you know, I'd do something else. And so I found my way at Fisk actually in my sophomore year. I transferred from another HBCU about 30 minutes outside of Philly. And at the time, I was really trying to determine, I knew I was going to go to grad school after undergrad. I knew I wanted to do something in the health industry in particular, and I knew that I wanted to have a direct impact on our people, on communities like where I was from. And the thought process at the time was to get my bachelor's in biology and then go on to graduate school and to get a master's degree or a PhD in biomedical engineering. So I could either work for some research and development, company or firm, looking at creating new technology that's going to address, Black people in particular. Like there was some magic company out here like this, which there probably is. And the second thought was, if not do that, actually start my own biotech startup with my biomedical engineering and biology background. But none of that happened. So, I'm here now. But that was kind of the thought process behind pursuing the bachelor's in biology at Fisk.
Okay, awesome. So during your time at Fisk, you were a student volunteer at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. So how do you get this, or how do you come across this experience?
So, that was just me really being, trying to, be one of those do-gooder, let me do everything goody two-shoe, students get the internship experience, have the grades, all these kind of things. And Vanderbilt University is, kind of the premier institution in Nashville. And it's just a college that we partner a lot with as Fisk. And so that opportunity came to me just kind of through the grapevine. And I applied. And in retrospect, it was definitely a basic opportunity. Like all I did for the most part was show up to one of the clinics, part of the medical center, and greet patients for the most part. Sometimes I would like help them, like log in or sign in, excuse me, for appointments and just talk to people. But I also did that because I really wanted some exposure to just like the healthcare, space. And so aside from being a patient, what better way to actually experience, healthcare than going there and being with the patients? And it was awesome because I got to meet people from all over Tennessee. And so it was not just people in kind of the urban core in the Nashville or Memphis or Chattanooga. Those are some big cities, like people would know. I apologize. And but then I also got to meet people from extremely rural parts of Tennessee, extremely different political views than my own. And just it was such a rich experience because it allowed me to sit with a person and be there with them before they went to go receive their care, before some life-changing event was getting ready to happen. And so, yeah, it was just, that was pretty much what it is. That's how I got it. Ended up doing it, I think, for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And yeah, it really paved the way for what I wanted to do after that.
Okay, that's awesome. And I feel like having those sorts of internship experiences are very valuable, especially when you're starting off. Like that was one of the things that I did as an undergrad as well. Interning at the VA and then
Oh,
another
wow.
another hospital. So that really, I think, made a mark on like my resume to get me into my Masters of Public Health program, and I'm sure it did the same for you. Um, but I guess you got your Masters of Public Health
Yes.
right after this, but when in that your bachelor's program did you like switch from biology, biotech engineering to wanting to do public health?
So I was in I'll never forget the day. I was in my Gen Bio 2 class and we were getting ready to have a lecture. And it was one of those days, it's like, oh, we're having a guest lecture. It's like, okay, chill. Whew, don't got to do anything. Don't have to think about class. And two representatives from Morehouse School of Medicine, my alma mater, actually from their Master of Public Health program, they came to speak. And one of the individuals was a current MPH student, and she spoke to what public health was, how we could use it to benefit, our community and the populations that we care about the most. And I was in like while she was speaking, I was like, Master of Public Health, because I'd never heard about that before. I'd never heard of the field. And I'm looking at some schools and looking at some programs, like, oh, this is nice. 2 years, relatively low cost. Okay, I could do this. And then right after that, I looked at the jobs and some job descriptions, and I was like, oh wow, this is exactly what I want to do. This will enable me to really apply my thinking on a population level. And so I was completely sold, and that was in 2015. Yeah, that was springtime 2015, and after that, I never looked back. It was public health from there on forward.
Okay, awesome. So why do you choose to go to Morehouse School of Medicine?
Oh wow! So this is funny. Like I said, I ended up at Fisk, transferring from Cheney University, which is another HBCU 30 minutes outside of Philly. So when I transferred to Fisk, that was like me waving goodbye to like my hometown, and like I knew I was probably never going to come back unless it was for school.
Mhm.
And so initially, I wanted to go back to Philadelphia. So I applied to some public health programs there. I applied to a couple of different other schools in other cities on the East Coast because that's just where I wanted to be. And yeah, the money was like, no thanks. Sorry, like you're not going to be able to do this. And so Morehouse was always, a school that I thought about, but honestly, it wasn't until I started to see like how big of an issue financing graduate school was going to be for me. That I was like, okay, Morehouse had the least expensive tuition out of all the schools I applied to. Let me really put my eggs in this basket because this is where I'm going to go. Also, the power of being at not only a medical school, which is an interesting experience for a public health student, but also, being at a historically Black college, also being in Atlanta, just spoke to like, wow, okay, if I'm really, as a Black, an inspiring Black public healthcare professional or public health professional, excuse me, if I really want to do this and learn how to work within my community, for my community, show up, be present, this is the best place to, to do all of these things at. And it ended up being a blessing. I applied, and out of all the schools, I actually was offered a full tuition scholarship to go to Morehouse for my first year of graduate school, at least. And so it all worked out.
Okay, that's awesome. Did you have a concentration?
No, so the program at the time was not doing concentrations, but I knew that healthcare administration, management, and policy were going to be my focus. I definitely was much more on the policy side of things.
Mm-hmm.
At first, there was a part of me that loved epidemiology. The scientist in me, really, I loved it. And so I always got the epi fever. But at the same time, I was just so focused on doing things now. And I did not want to, if I would have known, maybe I would have been an epidemiologist given the world right now. But I was so focused on I want to take the research directly into practice. So let me look at, a concentration or area of public health where I can, really implement that kind of, our public health ideology quickly. And so my thought process at the time was health policy, administration, and management. So that's what I ended up doing, or focusing most of my time when I was at Morehouse on those core aspects.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense. And you just said that you focus on policy first, and then you shift to more of the health administration management side. So how did that come up in your head?
Just being in class, honestly, I knew that, and I really, I think the brilliance about public health students is a lot of times it's up here. We have the vision, but we just don't know how all this stuff is operationalized. We don't know tangibly how these things happen, and so I knew that I always wanted to have my kind of end-all be-all job at some kind of health system, because when I was thinking just about who are the biggest stakeholders in a community, right? When it comes to our health, obviously health systems have all the major, money, political power, social influence, just everything. They control a lot. And so for me, at first, my thought process was trying to influence that stakeholder group in particular from the policy level. But again, I started to quickly realize the places and the kind of levels that I can kind of implement my own public health knowledge. And that quickly showed up itself in health administration. And it was kind of it really wouldn't make sense to be a policy wonk or someone that's trying to write the rules if you really don't understand the rules or how the rules get played out. And so I naturally started to migrate towards health administration. And then my experience in the summer of my first year of my MPH really kind of, nipped things in the bud for me okay, this is where I'm going to try to implement my change from here on out.
Yeah, and that definitely makes sense. So do you have any interest in going to policy in some years' time?
No, not really. It's such a, I'll read briefings, and I'll, I haven't read the entire Affordable Care Act, and probably never will. But I'll try to get to a sizable, page limit. No, I don't think I will. I think that for me, the last 4 years also just reaffirmed that it's a circus politically, and not to go too much on a young person rant, but for me, growing up in this country, there was always kind of this, you're taught to believe in our system, right? And to really validate it. And we know you get older, you become more conscious, and you understand okay, none of the stuff that these older people are telling me about politics is actually true. It's not as glamorous, or it's not really as respectable as we think it is. But I think that just philosophically speaking, that is not one change that I can make. Trying to implement things from the political level, I think there's too much to consider. And while we're trying to do those things, unfortunately, people are either still suffering or losing their lives. And so while I have the time here, I'd rather just focus on, again, doing the day-to-day stuff that's actually going to have direct impact, as opposed to the 10 to 15, year long-term play, which is important. And I'm not trying to, obviously persuade anyone to not do that, but that just wasn't my path. And I don't think I'd ever go back into that work, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's very logical. And then earlier you also said that it was very interesting going to you do your Master's of Public Health at a School of Medicine. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And this is, I should just disclaimers, no disrespect to doctors or any clinicians or anyone else who actually delivers any kind of care services to people. But at a medical school, even at an HBCU, even in Atlanta, even at Morehouse, there were just the healthcare system and the current paradigm that it operates on. So this for-profit kind of way that we do our healthcare in the United States, that was also, you see that at Morehouse. You see that at every single level. So as a public health student, we're sitting in class and quite frankly, we're learning how to deconstruct what our medical students are learning. We're learning how to deconstruct that system while they are learning how to practice and do the best that they can in the same system. And so I think that there was some clear tension, to be completely honest. I think that it also has its benefits as well, because as an individual that just has an MPH, one thing I always say to everyone is, no matter what your actual educational qualifications are, we're all public health practitioners in many ways. And I think the pandemic has really shown that, right? Like we all have a responsibility to understand, some core basic things about, public health. And so for me, I hope that going forward, that can continue to be a model that we leverage. I know that a lot of people want to have exclusive schools of public health and things of that nature. And if you can have that, I think it's important. But I also feel like that with all the tension, there was power in that, because oftentimes I was able to have the physician viewpoint, in class with me right there. Whereas, or on a project maybe outside of class, I could work with a couple of medical students and they would just be able to give me different things that I didn't consider. And then from the more population level, public health side of things, I was able to give them different nuggets that they didn't consider. And I think that when I look at developing a workforce, particularly a Black workforce in the healthcare sector, I definitely think it's important to have all of us together. There's pros and cons, and it's really ultimately about how you navigate that. And I'd be curious to see if anyone else, had a similar experience to me, but that's just my little 2 cents on being a public health student at, medical school.
Yeah, and definitely, if anyone here has that same experience, definitely reach out to Winston or myself and let us know. I'd definitely like to know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so during your Master's of Public Health, you were first a regional student liaison for the APHA. So how did you hear about this position?
So I was lucky. So I want to say, 2017 APHA was actually in Atlanta, and that was the same year that I had started at Morehouse. And so I really just learned from that position from just going to the conference, to be clear, first of all. And I wanted to get involved. It was the first APHA. It was so interesting for me. Because I'd been a traditional student my whole life, and I never really worked, before that. I had no sense of like professional organizations and just I didn't understand any of that. And so once I had gained a little bit of exposure to APHA through the conference, that's when I was like, okay, I kind of want to be like a young person. I want to be a student. I want to use this time to really see if I can connect with other individuals. And so just by connecting with the student assembly at the conference, they kind of reached back out saying, hey, here are the opportunities for leadership or to serve. And that was that.
Okay. Did you by chance go to like the student meeting that year or something like that?
I don't think I did. That was when I was in them, because I remember like there was a bunch of happy hours, and I don't think I was used to the idea of happy hours yet. So I was like, what is this? But no, I did not. I would just go to the expo hall, like the booth every single day, and then go to the student assembly section and always just meet different people there. That's how I did my networking.
Okay, awesome. So was it an application process for this?
Yeah, it was. There was an application process, I believe, but it was pretty simple. And to be completely honest, it was a cool opportunity. And the funny thing is, I feel like for me, when I look for different opportunities, in particular, like when it comes to leadership positions, quote unquote, it's always just about not necessarily like me, but like what is this going to do like for other folks, and how do I need to serve other people? And so the position really was just about trying to convene like all of the different public health programs or schools or students that are interested in the entire Southeast, which sounds big, but it's probably like on average, I want to say 20 or 30 people we would like meet, month to month, just or on a call just to talk about all the different public health initiatives. And then I really served as an individual that would take anything that was happening on a campus or a part of a program, try to elevate it, to the student assembly for more exposure, or if we needed resources, so if there were public health clubs or programs that wanted to have some APHA affiliated event on campus, I'll be the person to kind of connect them. But it was just a cool way to meet other students, learn about things that are going on, and then again, it gave me a little bit of leadership experience as well. So yeah, that was that in a nutshell.
Okay, that makes sense. And I don't want people to sleep on the fact that you said you went into this position not thinking about you, but like what you could do for others, because that is what the game is all about, like giving value to others. And once you
Absolutely.
give value to others, you're gonna get places in life, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, so don't think selfishly, think selflessly.
absolutely.
Okay. And then next you were a student volunteer at the Atlanta Community Food Bank.
Whew. Yeah,
So how'd you
man.
get this, and why do you want to do this?
So this is interesting. So the city of Atlanta is actually broken up into neighborhood planning units, or NPUs, as the city refers to them, and they're essentially a way to categorize a cluster of zip codes in the city. So you could describe like Atlanta by the neighborhoods, or you could describe them by the neighborhood planning units.
Mhm.
And so at Morehouse, actually, a part of our program, the part of the curriculum, the public health curriculum, was that students were divided into teams based on these in neighborhood planning units. And so I got neighborhood planning unit I, or NPUI, and that is where one of the many Atlanta community food banks was located.
Mhm.
And the intent was that students would partner with a community-based organization in this neighborhood planning unit, and then pretty much volunteer there as student leaders, or whatever, over the course of 2 years. And so that was like by faith that I was going to be a volunteer at the Atlanta Community Food Bank. What I did not really think about going into that experience was, number one, how much work it was, because it was an operation. And it was a lot. It was a job. We used to, when we were there as first year MPH students, we used to be like, man, this is a job. Like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, we had to kind of, volunteering. This should be a whole 9 to 5. But in my second year, I really grew to love the experience. And I think that's because I became so connected with the community. So the Atlanta Community Food Bank, I mean, it serves the most vulnerable, individuals and families from across the city of Atlanta. Again, there's multiple sites. We were just one food bank that was actually housed within a community center, a part of the Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church on the west side of Atlanta. And it was just cool. My role was really to, aside from stocking the food pantry and sometimes giving out food, I was one of the people who kind of handled registration. So we would pretty much like set the entire pantry up every day that we went to volunteer. And then the community would come in, we'd give them a ticket. There was this database that we used called Oasis, where we would put all of their information into this database, make sure that they qualify for any government programs, that they were aware about that, and then we would record the amount of food that they were getting that day, for a bunch of regulatory reasons. And it was awesome because I got to interact again with some of the most vulnerable families and community members across the entire city of Atlanta. And it was powerful for me because it was always a constant reminder that what you're doing, and like, this is the work. Like, we have, as a public health student, you have the class lectures, you have all the cool stuff that, the conference, all those, great things, but just serving, and and having that kind of built into your DNA as a professional is the work. And I take the bus and the train everywhere. I'm a huge public health, public transportation advocate, and naturally the public health guy in me. And so I took the train and bus everywhere in Atlanta when I was in grad school. And I used to I used to be there on average maybe 4 or 5 hours every day that I went to go volunteer. And by the end of the shift at night, I'd be packing up, and I would end up catching the bus with some of the families that I just served. And it was a powerful experience because some of them even lived in the same neighborhood that I did. And again, so it was just a constant reminder that, this is the work, this is why we're here, and we are here to serve. And that has to be a part of our DNA as professionals going forward. If we're not actually out there and touching the community, then we're not really doing anything. So yeah, that was a little soapbox. I get a little. It was an important memory to me. It was an important thing that I did for sure. And I miss everyone there. Loved them. Definitely turned into family. Just being able to connect with everyone, and I don't know. It was a nice. It was sometimes I would complain about having to be there because we had to do it for so many hours. But like I said, in my second year, I really came to love it and grow into all the responsibilities that I had there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That must have been a really great experience. That it seemed like it solidified you wanting to work in the community, and it
Oh, for sure.
solidified that you knew that this is the work that you're doing to help the community. So
Absolutely.
yes, that's awesome. And then after this, you had a administrative internship for Duke
Yeah.
University Health System. So how do you find this one?
Whew, this was interesting. So I entered Morehouse already knowing that I was going to want to be at somewhere. I knew for the summer I wanted experience at a major health system in the United States. So I was still a senior, actually at Fisk, when I had found this opportunity. And it's the Institute for Diversity and Health Equity Summer Enrichment Program. And so this program is essentially designed to give graduate students who are underrepresented minorities and who are interested in being healthcare leaders, kind of that essential experience that they need. So it's a 10 to 12 week summer internship. You apply to the program, and then the Institute for Diversity and Health Equity, they have host institutions, and the host institutions select the applicants that they want. So I had no idea that I was going to Duke when I applied to this. I didn't, and honestly, quite candidly, Duke is actually not a place that I picked. There were so many, there were so many places we could pick, and Duke was not one of the places I really thought about. But I was selected, and it changed my life, completely transformational. It was one of those internship experiences where you're exposed to so much, and working in a VA, I already know how complex of a setting this was. And I was at Duke University Hospital, which is the flagship hospital of Duke University Health System. So over 1,000 beds, thousands of employees. And I remember thinking about I remember the first couple of weeks I was actually in the president's office. That's where I was supposed to be interning at. And so there was four other interns with me. And I remember like everyone was being walked around to their different locations and meeting their preceptors, and it was all great. And I remember I was the last person to meet my preceptor, and it was supposed to be the president, but it ended up being his chief of staff. And we were talking, and I remember she asked me, well, what do you want to be? Like, why are you here? What do and typical answer, I want to be the CEO of a hospital one day. She's like, yeah, okay. I kind of like rolls my eyes like, sure. And I remember, we were talking about all these different things, and she's like, okay, so here's going to be your project. She's like, you see that filing cabinet over there? She's like, there's a bunch of files. We need to have them scanned. And, so I need you to just look through the files, determine, what kind of file it is, if it's important, and then scan it. It's probably going to take you all summer, but there you go. And I felt so defeated because I had walked around with all the other interns throughout the day, and they're meeting all their preceptors, and it's amazing. I'm like, oh, great. And I'm here, office of the president, and this is what happens to me. So I freaked out. I called my professors back in Morehouse in the first week at Duke. I was like, this is terrible. Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. And they didn't want me to leave Atlanta, to be quite honest. They were trying to have all of our students stay just for like these kind of logistical reasons. And I was completely overwhelmed. I ended up finishing that filing project within 3 weeks. And I mean, even before that, everyone at Duke was so warm and welcoming, and I was able to really foster a true sense of belonging in that organization. And again, like I had no exposure. This was my first time being in such a complex environment. And so I can recall thinking like, man, I'm evil now. I'm not a superhero anymore. Like I'm in a healthcare system. Like this is not the same. Like my teaching does not, or the way I was brought up as a public health student does not apply in this space at all. But I quickly realized over the course of 10 weeks, number one, I needed a lot more time to see and really truly evaluate that. But number two, that there are so many different ways you can actually operationalize equity and fight the fight within a healthcare system like that. And Duke really set the tone for where I'm at now. If it wasn't for some of the individuals I met there, some people who I still, consider as mentors and as advisors, I would not be in St. Louis in my fellowship. I'll speak a little more to that because I know that's coming. But yeah, so it was an excellent, excellent opportunity for me. I would definitely recommend for anyone who is interested in health administration. And if you have a summer, like if you have graduate school and you can really apply, definitely apply. I've met so many other young healthcare administrators out of this process, and I'm super connected with them on LinkedIn. And it gave me a good foundation again for what to expect, as a careerist, understanding that certain environments are more corporate than they are, so I really started to think, well, when I was still at Duke, okay, with this summer, do I want to go into a PhD right after my MPH? I don't think so. I've had this corporate experience now. Is this something I really want? Do I want to go into the nonprofit space? And so again, it was just a really, really valuable summer experience that I'll always be an advocate for. The Institute for Diversity and Health Equities Summer Enrichment Program. Everyone should apply.
Thanks for dropping that, because I was just about to ask you to repeat
Yes.
it. Okay, awesome. That sounds like a really awesome experience there, and I'm glad that you got to have that experience. And what made you like? How did you come across that when you were looking for it as a senior? You said.
Yeah, so it was literally just like health policy summer graduate, internships. Just the Google search, and that was pretty much it. But like I said, I always had thought, like even before I got to be a public health student, I also thought about like what I wanted my long term job to be. So I used to be a senior, and I'd be talking with my friends like, hey, like I want to go ahead and try to be a director or something in a leadership position at a health system. And then I want to also be able to be in the nonprofit space. And eventually I also want to be like the health commissioner of a city. That was actually kind of like low key my public health dream for a very long time, is to be the health commissioner of Philadelphia. But I knew that again, like the leadership, the administrative, management policy spaces where I wanted to play. And so that just, it was the it was the most legitimate opportunity that I found. And so I kind of just stuck with it. And I did. And there's a lot of, I don't know, but I know for me, there was a lot of pressure going into the summer after my first year to like have an opportunity to actually be doing something. And I kind of solidified that process early on. So it was really nice. But yeah, it was just the appeal. It just completely aligned with what I felt like I wanted to do. And it gave me the experience I needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I remember my question. So what was the point in which, like you said that you felt like you were a bad guy, not a superhero anymore? What was the point that made the switch to say, okay, I can affect change in this setting?
So there was so we were I was on a project, and the project was, we were divided into teams, and we had to come up with a design for a particular part of the hospital that was really terrible for the patient experience. There was this huge, confusing parking lot, and there was this really like just depressing tunnel that you had to walk through to get to like the big hospital where all the nice stuff is. Um, and so our project was to use design thinking to kind of like come up with a design that's reflective of our patients, of our team members, of our community, so that we can, overall enhance their experience. And so we were doing interviews, like really just different interviews with different stakeholders. And on our list of people to interview was environmental services. And I'm gonna be super candid here. And so I remember thinking like, okay, most of these people are gonna be Black. I'm Black. Like, I've talked to a few of these folks. Like, there's a difference. There's a culture that I can appreciate and they can appreciate. So I ended up doing, and at the time I was doing all the interviews with actually one of the fellows at Duke. But this particular interview with environmental services, I did by myself, just because I wanted it to be able to have that natural dialogue. And I ended up interviewing this guy. And I'm so upset at myself that I can't remember his name, because I'd love to reference him for people to search him up. But he was actually a staff on staff of environmental services. I think he'd been working for the hospital for over or just about 10 years. And he was the only person responsible for cleaning the entire tunnel on his shift. So number one, there was just insight there. Like, wow, like I would have never known that. And I'm an administrator, I'm in a suit, I'm walking back to the president's office. I would have never known that only one person is responsible for cleaning this entire, part of our hospital. Number two, he was this amazing philanthropic guy who had started this program in his community in Durham, which was only the second program in the world to do this. But he is somehow like he would donate bikes, and then he would install the bikes as an art installation in the neighborhood that he was donating them to, and then would give them to kids after that. And like the only other, and he did this in partnership with someone in Australia. Now, mind you, this is an EVS worker at a hospital telling me this. So I'm taking the notes down, and I'm like, what? This is kind of crazy. Like, this is hard. Like, why are you here now? Like, what are you doing? And I remember I took that back to the team. They were all very impressed with, the interview and what I gained from it. And it turned out that that guy was actually, the EVS worker was actually someone that many of the presidents at Duke had known about, because they actually partnered with him for his like bike, giveaway program. And like the fellows never known that. So like when I like brought it up like in front of the president, he was like, oh, that's such and such, and we help them all the time. And it was crazy because the fellows were like, wow, like that really has changed my perspective, that there are people at all levels of our organization that are really kind of, doing something to, contribute to our brand, our name, the care that we provide, all these different things. And in my evaluation, like as an intern, I remember we were sitting down and my preceptors, because I had multiple, but they were really talking, and they're like, you know what? We really think you found your purpose. You were able to, have a conversation, get, someone to open up. You were able to really transcend some of the political nature, of our organization and how we work, to really highlight and empower a team member who's already doing such great work. And while it was at the time, I didn't understand it. It wasn't only until I reflected back, but I was like, wow, me just showing up in that space. There was no public health science. There was no there wasn't any of that. It was very simple. It was just me being able to, be able to embrace my culture and be able to have that dialogue with someone as an intern, and I was able to amplify, their platform. And so that's just, again, like when I realized, like, all right, it's not all evil, bad people here. And, I think I would say that in healthcare, we're kind of, sometimes I don't blame people. I'll say that. I definitely think that we perpetuate a lot of things that are anti-public health, but I don't think that's because we know that we're doing that per se. But that was kind of the moment that really changed my mindset, that I could use this pathway to actually implement some true change.
Okay, yeah, and that is a very fascinating story. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing
long
that.
story.
It's all right. So this is your podcast, man. So next up, you were emerging leader professional development program via Focus St. Louis. So how do you come across this? Was it development program? How do you come across?
Yeah, so it's so emerging leaders is so focus. So like a lot of cities, actually, I'll just start off. I always gotta give context, but so a lot of cities kind of have these lead programs. So lead Atlanta, lead Durham, lead St. Louis. So Focus St. Louis was actually the first leadership development program like that in the country. They kind of set the standard for a lot of the other leadership development programs that we see. And emerging leaders is particularly a program targeted for individuals aged 22 to 35 who are, early to mid-level careers that are really, passionate about trying to transform the region. And so that's a key critical part to the program, because St. Louis is super messed up. So like I've talked about it and shared some content via LinkedIn, but it's definitely the most disparate city I've ever lived in my life, particularly when it comes to race. So it's not that I haven't seen anything new here, but just the level of division and how different neighborhoods are here is ridiculous. And so for me, I was super confused. I moved to St. Louis and I was completely culture shocked. I just got my MPH. I just left Atlanta. I'm going to be a fellow at this big fancy hospital, and I had no way of really articulating, conversing with other folks my age that are also professionals about how do we address all of the BS that we see in St. Louis. And so my boss, one of my bosses, actually recommended the program to me, and I applied, and it was amazing because what I was able to, as a transplant, there's just a lot of history I didn't understand. There's a lot of, again, social context that if you don't grow up here, you won't understand. And so the first thing that was a big plus for me was just being able to actually work with young people who were from St. Louis, like actually were from here. So they had an appreciation for the history. They could give me some context. But then also, I think for me, it was a way to kind of flex my ideology, see where it would land with people. We would talk about, it was a year-long program, but it happens in cohorts. So I was a part of the fall cohort. So we only met for about 4 or 5 months. But we would have really rich conversation, really different perspectives about a lot of stuff, particularly just, around racial inequity. That's really what the conversations were always about. And like I said, it just provided a forum where I could see like, okay, if I say this, how are people going to respond? Like, is this too radical? How, can we do this? Is this an actual idea that you think is good? Yeah, so it was a powerful experience for me. And it was just something that also kind of amplified my platform within St. Louis for sure. It gave me the ability to leverage that network and connect with people across industries. So not only in the healthcare industry, but it was definitely something that I think is worth the while for sure.
Okay. And did you have any other like big takeaways, like leadership wise from that?
For sure, man. Oh wow, there's so many stories that I could actually talk about within Focus. So yeah, it's the leadership thing is weird because I feel like that's something that like 50% of people don't actively think about, like their leadership development. And when I say people, I'm referring to like us young professionals. Like 50% of us don't really think about that as a thing, right? Like it's not really something we make tangible. And then 50% of us think about it all the time and read a bunch of books on how to be a leader and, try to act as if there's some formula and all these different things. For me, it was, again, it's all about serving, the people. That's the way, you're in a leadership position to serve, not to do anything else. First and foremost, that's it. And I think that for me, as I'm only 25, and so I was 23, 24 when I did that. And it also just provided that forum where I could actually try to be a leader. Because so picture this, like it's 20 to 30, people. They're all young, clearly, highly motivated individuals, successful, intelligent subject matters in their respective industries. And you take all these people, you put them in the room, and someone asks a really difficult question, a really uncomfortable question, right? For me, what that did, I could do that with you and me, or amongst my friends, or in undergrad, like whatever. But now it's like, okay, I'm a young professional. I have something to lose, technically, just a reputation. Whatever I say, this is real. And so again, it was like a simulation. You're a leader. You're in a room with a bunch of other leaders, and this gets asked, or this is the topic of conversation. How do you operate? How do you bring people in? So particularly around like the subject of race, I had to realize like, okay, I don't want to polarize, like any different sides, any different perspectives. And some people are going to see this when I post it on LinkedIn. So I'm trying to constantly think about like, how do I talk about this? But so there was, probably 6 to 7 out of the 30 of us, probably 6 to 7 of us were Black, and this is just an estimation. And so there were some conversations where out of the 6 to 7 Black participants of emerging leaders in my cohort, 5 of us were like, yep, that's the truth. That's our reality. Like, this is how we feel. Exactly. But I noticed maybe 2 to 3 individuals who, were not saying anything when, Black issues came up. And, I had to dig deep inside myself and say, hey, this is a journey. Discovering your Blackness is a journey. It's a whole different podcast. I know we can talk about. But I have to respect everyone's lived experiences and how that informs their perspective. And so I found myself, really going back to some of the, Black, participants of the program being like, hey, I know that this was the general consensus. I know we were pretty hard in today's session, but how do you think about that? Like, are you aligned with that? Was that your experience? Like, tell me about that. And so that gave me just, again, the exercise to really, even within the context of, Blackness and being all connected, it, just gave me practice on how do you handle different perspectives from that angle. I also think I recall we had a session on racial inequities in St. Louis and the history of racial inequities in St. Louis. And one question that I asked kind of boldly was like, yo, white people, like, did you guys not talk about this like at home? Like, you're from St. Louis, like, where did you not know about this? And, that opened up a whole can of worms. Me literally just saying, yo, to everyone who's white in the room, how did this feel? And I think for some, that definitely actually made them a little bit more chill. For some, it probably made them a little bit more, like nervous. But at the end of the day, I remember asking myself, hey, that wasn't valuable for me. Like, I may have opened a couple of other people's, I may have assisted or supported people opening their mind to different thoughts or, opinions or perspectives, but as a leader, quote unquote, I didn't do anything for it's not like I was advocating for my own people. And the person who was facilitating that session actually ended up becoming one of my mentors. And he told me, like, dude, there's no way you can give value to other people without giving value to yourself. Like, you have to understand that, like, it's a two-way street, like, even if you don't see it. And so that was another leadership lesson that I definitely learned from emerging leaders, right? Is that, like, no matter how radicalized, we are and what we really want to do, at the end of the day, again, serving all, and really in that capacity, it's always going to be, mutually beneficial. So that's kind of the two things that I took away in terms of leadership.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful, I think. And then you're also a board member for the educational board at the American Public Health Association. So how do you come across this? What was the timeline for this also?
So this one, I can't even remember. I think this was after. I'm trying to remember where I was for this. I want to say I was at Duke. Actually, this happened when I was at Duke. So 2018, and this was right a few months before the 2018 conference in San Diego. I had applied to be on the policy board, I believe the scientific policy board, but the position was already taken up for student representative. And so MPH reached back out to me like, hey, that's already taken up, but do you want to be on the education board? And at the time, I was like, no, I didn't think my interests aligned with school at all. I was like, I don't care about school and teaching and whatever. No thanks. But one of my professors from Morehouse actually had already served on the board. And so I was in the mindset of just kind of saying yes to any opportunity that would align with what I would be doing. So obviously I want to be able to serve on multiple boards, throughout my career. And this was going to be the first opportunity for me to do so. And so I took the position. And then my one of my professors, like I said, she's on the board as well. And one of my fellow Fiskites, she's actually, she's an older alum of Fisk University, but she's also on the board as well. So I had actually two really close advisors with me, and it was an amazing experience. This was one of the things that, and I would tell people, particularly when it comes to an organization like APHA, to just embrace it, and to really embrace any opportunity that comes, in your lap, because I had no expectations for what this was going to be. Like, I was like, okay, I'll be a student representative. I don't know, I'll be the young person and I'll speak to whatever they want me to speak to for a year. But I actually was able to fly out to DC. I was actually able to meet with Dr. Benjamin there. I was able to work with everyone, on the board, work on a few different kind of core things that will be embargoed for now, for me to talk about anyway. But it was really cool. It was an amazing experience. And it was just another one of those professional ventures that I really needed. Like, you want to be able to serve on a board just so you have that experience going forward when you actually can do stuff, and have like more influence that how to leverage that. But that was totally random way it happened, but it was an awesome opportunity. And I'm still serving on the board now, which is cool.
Okay. Has your mind changed about the educational part of it?
Oh man, so I'm trying to organize the thought so it makes sense when people watch it. But absolutely, it is. Now I find myself really wanting to go back into the academic space outside of, my career anyways, like particularly in healthcare. I still want to be attached to a medical school, to a large academic medical center. And I still want to be able to, I've had different experiences throughout the summer, this past summer, that have really made me want to stay connected with students. And so now it's all I care about. So now it's totally different, which is funny. In a matter of 2 years, things have changed, but yeah.
Awesome. And I'll definitely be putting people in touch with you. So look out for that. So your current position is a David A. G, or is it Gee? Is it Gee or G?
Gee, I mean, some people say Gee, some people say G.
All right. David A. Gee or G, administration fellow with at Barnes Jewish Hospital. So
Yes.
how do you come across this? Or did like junior MPH was a health administration fellowship something that you wanted, or
Never heard of it. Never heard of it before until I got to Duke. So when I got to Duke, I was an intern there. I had this public health background. Clearly, was passionate about, advancing health equity. How do we do that? And in the health administration space, and let me dial back, the hospital administration space in particular, there's a lot of emphasis put on either the operations or the strategic planning. And so these health systems are huge. They literally, it's their buckets of work. Operations, strategic planning. People focusing on strategy. How do we do all this stuff in the future? How do we make sure our business is, still viable and grow, all of our different platforms? And in the operations, it's the day-to-day. How do we get patients in the door, out of the door, and back home safely? And so that's all I knew. And I wasn't really clear on how I was going to get those opportunities after my MPH. And so when I was at Duke, I happened to be working in the president's office. In the administrative fellows for that particular year, that's where their base was, kind of their base of operations. And so I found myself around these really cool young people. They all had masters in health administration. I was like, oh, they're cool people. And I had no idea they were, none of that, meant anything to me. And I remember probably halfway through my internship, people started asking me like, hey, so what are you going to do when you go back to Morehouse? And I was like, I don't know, I may do my PhD. And they were like, well, is that really what you want to do? Do you want to teach? And at the time, I did not want to do that at all. I was like, no, I don't want to. And so the fellows were like, oh, well, you definitely should apply to our fellowship here at least. And I was like, oh, fellowship, what is that? And so that's when everything opened up for me. And then it was funny. The chief human resources officer at Duke, she was actually the former chief human resources officer at Barnes Jewish Christian Healthcare System, where I am at now. And so she was able to connect me with people. One of the interns, his mentor was actually the CEO of the health system that I work at. And so I was talking with him while I was at Duke, and I applied for this opportunity, and I was really fortunate enough to get it. And for anyone who doesn't really know about administrative fellowships, they're essentially 1 to 2 year programs for recent graduates who are interested in becoming leaders in the hospital administration space. And if it's a 2 year program, particularly, you rotate throughout the hospital. So I participated in various rotations throughout the hospital my first year. And then in your second year, you choose a specific department or service line that you want to go into. And then the hopes is that after that, you just kind of naturally grow and develop as a leader and, get to work on cool projects. And so my first year was really just shadowing a lot of the executive members of hospital teams. So vice president of oncology, vice president of finance, understanding their book of work, and then also just working on, projects within the hospital, kind of prove myself, but also, again, gain some experience. And yeah, this has been crazy. It's been a crazy, crazy experience. I'll shut up so you can ask questions to guide it, but I have so much to say about this one in particular.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to say that firstly that the exposure is the thing that got you to your fellowship, like knowing what that fellowship is, like, and even before that, getting that internship was very important. Before you talk more about the experience as a fellow, what was the application process like? Is it the you apply, then you talk to the current fellows, and then that process.
Man. So that was also, I remember being so stressed out leaving Duke. So there was a fellow there, And he would meet with me actually like every week to work on my application. Like, cause about the 7th week, I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply. And so I left Duke knowing that I needed to have like my letters of recommendation, like all that stuff. So I'm like an intern finishing up at Duke the last 3 weeks, but also I'm not aware of how big of an undertaking this is getting ready to be, just the application process in itself. And so I remember the first thing the fellows at Duke, they were like, okay, you're going to apply to here, to here, to here. You need to start contacting those people at those organizations. Completely new for me. I had never done anything like this. So I was like, what? I just got to randomly call people and tell them that I'm interested in this and I want to talk. And they're like, yep, that's how you do it. So I was like, okay. So I started, calling fellows around the country just to get their perspective. The second part, again, is actually, completing the application process, which is, it's such a competitive field, and it's so, sometimes it's toxic, to be completely honest. Like, that's from my observation, it's a little too competitive. But you try your best to really create. For me, I'm also a creative person, so I like to incorporate all aspects of myself, particularly when I'm looking for opportunities, so people know what they're getting. And so I spent a long time on just refining my application, my personal statement, and really thinking about what is important to me, what do I value. So boom, you have your application, you apply. Then you, like you suggested to you, if you get selected, if your application is solid enough, the first year fellows, will reach out to you for a formal interview. And so I remember, like it was yesterday, I had a formal Skype interview. Some fellowship programs ask you ridiculous questions. So Duke had asked me, I remember they had asked me, and for one of their fellowships, because they have multiple ones, if I could choose any state to succeed from the United States, which would it be? And yeah, exactly. And it's like, this is over the phone in real time. So you're like, and they're meant to show different things about how a person thinks. But the interview for Barnes Jewish Hospital, I knew that this was the one that I really wanted to get, and so I put a lot of time connecting with the first year fellows and really just trying to understand them, understand what they care about the most. And so by the time that I entered that Skype interview, it was more so kind of like, okay, Winston, we like you. Let us, just validate this. Prove to us that you're someone we should like. And so after the Skype interview went really well. Most fellowships, they will then invite you to an on-site interview if you're one of the finalists. And so for my on-site interview, I believe it was 8 other people. And so they fly us out to the hospital, and I spent the first day in St. Louis, just getting to know some of the applicants, driving around the city, getting to meet some other fellows and other young professionals where I would have been ended up working. And then there's a dinner, which is like this. It's the interview before the interview. It's actually the only thing that's important. And I remember being in the airport right before I flew to St. Louis from Atlanta. And there's this guy that was in front of me, and he was looking at me because we were sitting down waiting to board. And he's like, "Son, you look nervous." And I was like, "Yes, I am nervous. I'm getting ready to do something I've never done before." And he's like, "What is it?" So I told him about, everything, the dinner. And he is a military veteran. And he was like, this is what you should do. Go into that dinner, no matter who you're sitting around, just try to have a good conversation with one person. Don't try to be the person that's running around the room, shaking everyone's hands. Just who's ever sitting next to you, just talk to them. So I did that. And one of the people who ended up sitting next to me was actually a former fellow himself, and he was the director of supply chain for our academic medical campus now, actually. But I talked to him for the entire night. I don't even remember meeting any other executives, and I was exhausted. And then the second day, you literally go into these back-to-back in-person interviews with all of the executives. And so it's weird because it's a time where you're trying to prove yourself, but it's also a time where you really should be evaluating, like, do I like this culture? Do I like these people? And I remember remembering that, like, before my first interview, I was like, you know what? I have no way to tell if I like these people enough to move here for 2 years. Like, what is this? Like, what is this process? And so I wasn't nonchalant about it, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to enter every single room, and I'm really just going to be like myself. I'm just going to be Winston. I'm not going to be the applicant. I'm not going to be the MPH student from Morehouse. I'm not going to be someone trying to land a fellowship. I'm just interested in talking with this person about their position. 2 interviews happened during my process, and I know we're over time, so I apologize. But okay, good. Two interviews, at 2 really interesting interviews. So the first interview, I actually cried in. I cried in front of my preceptor. She asked me, she had said, "What got you interested in healthcare?" And I started talking about my parents. And at the time, this is before my father passed, of course, a year and a half, but he was still suffering from congestive heart failure. So I told them everything I told her everything I told you. They inspired me to, really have this sense of, service and really wanting to uplift my community. But at the same time, I started crying because I felt like I'm doing all this stuff to do for other people. Maybe I should be taking a sacrifice for my career and focusing on my parents. And the tears just started rolling down. And this was like the first or second interview. And in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not built for this. Like, I'm not going to get this. Cause she's probably like, this guy is who? Wow, are you serious? But she ended up tearing up as well in that same interview. And, really just gave me some gems, and I still wasn't confident I was going to get it. I was like, yeah, she's probably like not professional. That's what she wrote. And then the next interview was with the vice president of our support services. So this individual, he oversaw facilities, housekeeping, food and nutrition, some of the quite candidly lower wage jobs in our hospital. And I didn't know his political affiliation at all, but I just opened that can of worms up, because I'm in St. Louis, I'm in the Midwest. I know it's just different. So, a different culture. And he was, conservative, but he was so appreciative that like I was able to actually embrace that. And I didn't shy away from that conversation. And I think just with those 2 interviews alone, that really helped me stand out. But that process was ridiculous. I mean, I would not want to do it again, but I also know that it was definitely good practice, particularly if, you want to do this corporate kind of thing and, we want to work in these organizations. If anyone that's watching or listening, if that's what you want to do, it's great practice. But for me personally, way too much. It was way too much.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of great information there, like in everything you said there. And I definitely I applied, I want to say like to 4 health administration fellowships, and I definitely understand what you're saying. It's a tough process, and there's just
Yes.
so many people trying to get those positions, and it really is very competitive. So congrats to you for getting that. And I think it's just so important. Like you said, like you're like, all right, I'm not gonna be Winston from Morehouse. I'm just gonna be myself, because
Right.
and I feel like that's always the thing when it comes down to those last interviews. It's like they know you can do the job, but they want to know, like, are you the person that's going to be able to speak to them and stuff like that. And I think you made a very good point there also. Like, you didn't know what that person's political affiliation was, but you were
Right.
open about it. And I think that's what we need. We need those open conversations, those candid conversations to really hear the different perspectives, because sometimes we think because someone is a different political affiliation, or we can't say this or we can't say that, and then that kind of like confirms the bias that they might have in their head, or we just don't debate these things that are going on in our head. So I think that's a hugely important aspect of like public health, just life, but public health as well, definitely.
Absolutely, man.
So tell me, okay, so I had another health administration fellow back a couple weeks ago. And one challenge that she had was that she didn't know the business parts of like health administration,
Sure.
coming from the Masters of Public Health.
Yes.
So did you have like a similar challenge, or what were some other bigger challenges that you had?
So thankfully, and this is where this is probably gonna get super long-winded. So please feel free to just interrupt me with comments, questions, anything.
I'll take some notes.
So for me, because of my experience at Duke, the business aspect of healthcare was not shocking, but it's definitely something that every public health student, if you want to go into hospital administration, or if you want to take a more industry corporate job, you got to know, because it will destroy you. Like, if you don't know that and you don't understand that at the end of the day, the bottom line, profits and losses are on everyone's mind in a hospital, you're gonna be in for a rude awakening, and it'll be hard to adjust to the culture. So that wasn't necessarily that was not like the problem with me, for me. This is where this is what I want to talk about the most anytime I get a chance to, is that as public health students, we often, not even as just students, is anyone who's trying to, I feel like, advocate, or fight for racial equity and the elimination of racial disparities within healthcare, we typically, our minds immediately go to the physician-patient interaction. That's what we go to. That's what we know. So rest in peace to Dr. Susan Moore, in Indiana. We think about those kind of unfortunate experiences. You have a racist physician or a racist clinician. They're going to impact my care, and this is the problem. But the truth is that you could have every provider in the United States or the world, quite frankly, be culturally competent and be a social justice warrior, and you still wouldn't change a lot of the outcomes, because just like, it's almost like the racism that we experience from the physician and patient interaction, that's like the tip of the iceberg. Like, there are so many systematic things that exist underneath that it that's cool. Like, I'm like, yeah, cultural competency, education development, that's okay. Like, those are small fixes to me, to be completely honest. I had the opportunity to be on a project that was involved in developing an adult sickle cell program for the hospital, which is something that our hospital had never had before. And we have St. Louis Children's Hospital, which is a phenomenal, sickle cell kind of brand and, a team that's dedicated to caring for our sickle cell patients. But as adults, just like everywhere else in the country, when sickle cell patients turn from children to adults, they just kind of lose the continuity of their care. They don't have, it's really hard to, continue to get like some of the best level of practice that you could have gotten as a child, just because you're an adult now. Things are totally different. And I am a carrier of the sickle cell trait. I do not have any sickle cell disease, but I am a carrier. So I took this project with a lot of passion. And there were so many issues, just like the fact that sickle cell disease is like a premier disease specific to, Black people all across the world, the UK, US, and West Africa in particular. And it's not, cancer is its own thing, right? That's a service line. That's a department. Heart and vascular services, that's a department. That's a kind of thing. But we don't have any kind of way to organize the care that specifically pertains to Black folks, in this case, sickle cell. So that was the first thing that I saw, that it wasn't a standard. Like, despite this being such a, endemic disease within the Black population, it was not a standard to have best practices of care at one of the largest and best hospitals in the country. So that was the first thing that I just had to like say, whoa, that's deep, right? Like, this is interesting. This is a chronic issue within our community. St. Louis is a Black city, and we don't even have the proper infrastructure in place to provide care for these patients. Beyond that, when I started to understand that like so many patients experience the same outcome despite their socioeconomic status. So we have sickle cell patients that are extremely well educated, from extremely well-off, families and backgrounds. And we have sickle cell patients that are homeless and seek care through the emergency department. Regardless, their patient experience was the same. And it was for a variety of reasons, a lot of reasons. I'll just tell one story in particular. So, and I do this thing where I get really connected with patients, which is an emotional investment sometimes, for sure. But so, there's one patient who has sickle cell, and I'm trying to think. Okay, yeah, no HIPAA, not violating anything. And so they were just pretty much, telling me that a lot of times there are instances in where they cannot get the kind of services that they receive, because of a physician, blah, 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 whatever. And so in this one particular instance, I received a call and someone needed a transfusion, and they could not get admitted to any of my system's hospitals for this transfusion. And they couldn't get admitted, they couldn't get admitted to any hospitals, period, for a transfusion in St. Louis. And they're suffering from a pain crisis. And so I said to myself, wow, that's a pretty, basic service, for most, health systems to be able to provide. It's kind of crazy. So I went back to the team of the doctors and administrators that are working on developing this program. And I said to them, hey, I had an incident where a patient, just needed a transfusion to remedy their pain crisis, and they couldn't even get that. is there a way that we could partner with any institutions around St. Louis, or could we make kind of this consortium of institutions that sickle cell patients know, hey, if you need something like a blood transfusion, this is where you go. And the response that I got was, we would not want to partner with anyone because of competition, and we'd be, losing, our customer base to a potential competitor. And I was just like, what? Like, do you not understand what I just told you? And so it's that, and that's something, and obviously that the person who said that did not think that they were perpetuating, racial inequities, but that's how it comes to play. And so for me, I think just the biggest problem I had was really understanding how deeply entrenched racial disparities, racial inequities are within the healthcare system, and how healthcare systems really unknowingly perpetuate them. Again, I think we always talk about the harm from the physician to patient interaction. I think we know that the healthcare system is trash in the United States. Could really care less about if anyone feels any differently. But I don't think we ask the right questions about, the actual specific examples and the different levels of influence, so whether it's the hospital saying, well, we have to be competitive. So because of that, the sickle cell patients, they're just going to get short in the stick of whatever decision we make based off of that, thought process, or, other things about even being able to recruit physicians that are recruit hematologists in particular that can practice, and provide the best care services to sickle cell patients. If I'm a health system and I can't recruit Dr. Amari Richards, who is like the world-renowned, sickle cell researcher, then yeah, a lot of sickle cell patients are just going to be out of luck in St. Louis. And I think that is something, we see that specifically with a lot of different vulnerable populations, but particularly with Black people, and the diseases that we suffer from and the services that we need from healthcare systems. There's not enough attention on what we need exclusively. And that is just something that I had to wrestle with, and I had to understand. So you take that, right? You understand that. So now you go into these meetings and you think to yourself, okay, well, now I have to speak for everybody, because another thing that impacted me was just the corporate culture. And I actually talked with a former fellow at Duke actually recently. They were saying to me, that my experience at Barnes-Jewish Hospital was not unique to Barnes-Jewish Hospital, right? That as an intern, I loved Duke. It was amazing. But for them, as a fellow at Duke, it was the same exact, experience. I remember 2 weeks into my fellowship, I had to present at this meeting. It's like 50, 60 people there. And, for fellowships, any kind of fellowship, you have to be a bold person. Like, you have to want to, but particularly administrative fellowships, you really want to have to be in front of people, be put on the spot, always have your skills and abilities like under a microscope, because everyone's like, the spotlight is on you. And I remember I was asked to do something along with my co-fellow. I got up and presented at this meeting that this group asked me to do something for. It was very basic. And I presented, and the reaction was very cold. Only like 4 people applauded for me out of a group of like 50 people. Not that I was looking for applause, but those 4 people were all the Black executives in this particular meeting. And one of them comes up to me after the meeting, and she says, you're just going to have to get used to, people doing that to you here, because to be completely honest, you're a threat to a lot of people. They've never seen, a young Black male fellow, and I happen to be the first at my organization, or at my hospital in particular. And she was like, so that's just something that you're going to have to be aware of. And as a young person, I was like, no, screw that. Like, what? This is, no, we need to be well beyond, that. But she was right. And there would be instances that would happen later on where I'd be in a meeting and I'd be the first person to show up. A director would be in the meeting as well, and they wouldn't say anything to me. They wouldn't even say hello to me. I'd literally be sitting 2 chairs away from them trying to talk to someone, and they wouldn't say anything. Another person walk in, they start talking. I every now and then I'll be at the hospital and trying to, say hi to people, and make sure I'm in, spaces. And a lot of times, some of the actual leaders, some of the executives themselves, gave me a hard time, really made it difficult for me to adjust to the organizational culture. And just even another Another thing that happened to me, I'm thinking and just remembering now. I remember I was in a meeting. I'm asking all these questions. It was a meeting. We're really passionate about the topic. It's in my first year. And every single question I asked, the executive that was in the meeting with us, they would respond to my co-fellow and look my co-fellow directly in the face. And he's, white, 10 years older than me, has a clinical background, but they would look him directly in the eye every time, even though I was asking the question. And this is 2019, and I really couldn't believe it. I suffered so much just adjusting to the culture, because I was just like, there's no way that I'm in this position now. Like, and a lot of my professors at Morehouse tried to tell me, like, watch, you're gonna go there and see what happens. And I was like, you guys are wrong. I'm from a really inclusive place. I'm used to this. I can do it. And so it was hard. It was just difficult. And I think you definitely have to have like some steel about you. You have to really be confident in who you are, because I quickly shriveled up. And so I'm all dynamic now and on LinkedIn, and they seem like I'm super active, but there are certain months that I was depressed, man. I didn't think I made the right decision. I was like, wow, this fellowship life is not for me. I should have just stayed in Atlanta, where I was already valued. But what it did for me is it gave me the foundation to really know how to operate in the corporate space. Mm-hmm. And so now it's easy. Like, now I know how to do it now, but at first I was just like, yeah, I can't do this. These people don't value me here, so I don't value them. And the unfortunate thing about it is, out of 10,000 people, it only takes 4 or 5, wrong interactions or not so nice interactions to really completely sway someone's perspective on that organization. So those are the two biggest things for me, just digesting how deep racial inequity is and how complex of an issue it is within the system, and how we unintentionally perpetuate that inequity, but then also adjusting to the corporate American organizational culture. Those are like the two things that I faced. One of them I'm still facing, just because it's the nature of our work, but the other one, like I said, I'm good now. It made me a better person, for sure.
Yeah, and that is awesome. So what do you think is needed to shift from having a more equitable health system per se? Because as you're talking there, and it just comes up in my mind, like, you were the first Black male fellow. You're probably one of the few Black fellows in general, and that's probably the case for all the health systems across the country. Mm-hmm. So there's not really a lot of leadership or people in positions where they're able to impact those changes. Like, even with that sickle cell example you gave earlier, like, you can bring it up, but there aren't people there that are thinking that this is passionate enough, or maybe that they're just thinking about the bottom line, and this is a non-issue or something like that. So what do you think is needed to shift this conversation? And I guess this could be a whole podcast in itself too.
No, this is I want to be, I don't know. I'm going to say what my vision, because it could change. And, we may be, 20 years, we may look back on this and laugh. That always sounds so stupid. But, so I think when I look at what my health system would be versus what the health system is, right? I understand that, the reality is no one looked at the healthcare system and said, we want to make sure that only this group of people actually is going to, be healthy, right? Like, the system came about in terms of what we see today, hospitals and academic medical centers and all this complexity. That was all purposely done for profit. Like, in the last 150 years, all that had to do with money. So that's the first thing that I want to call out, is that at the end of the day, the business model of healthcare in the United States is the system. And no matter how you try to slice it or dice it, unless you completely want to disrupt that, you're going to have to kind of operate from that framework. So that's the first thing that I will say. I think, we always point to what can be done in terms of getting more folks that look like us in these spaces, which obviously is important. Like, you need that. But what I will say is, again, like, until you fundamentally change the system and what we're trying to actually do, that won't matter. There could be a bunch of me's, it still won't matter. And I've met Black healthcare executives, Black physicians who have told me, like, yeah, man, it took me 10 years to get funding for this one program, but hey, 10 years I did it, right? And I'm kind of like, yeah, I guess like it's important. You're feeling a need, but there's so many other people. So I think it starts for us. It definitely starts with actually um, having some sort of social capital or power in these spaces, right? So you walk into my healthcare, you walk into my hospital now. The majority of Black people you see are going to be cleaning things up, scrubbing floors, or serving people food, straight up, you know. And I look at a world, I look at a new healthcare system. If I had to start my own, I look at a system in which, you know, that paradigm is completely, you know, goes away. That the people who are going to be, you know, providing the healthcare services will be the folks who look like me, number one. And I don't necessarily think that they have to be doctors also. I think that, you know, there's already research obviously on this, but I feel like I remember being in Philly. It used to be a joke to be like a certified medical assistant in high school. Like that was like oh, you got yourself a little job, okay, you know, got a little bit of money. You used to see a lot of people in scrubs on the train and everything. And so and as a certified medical assistant, they go into all these different healthcare facilities. And once I started just to understand the system more and more, I was like, imagine like if you actually had programs that were specifically tailored like to create entire Black healthcare workforces. So a Morehouse School of Medicine, an example, right? But we know that that is Morehouse School of Medicine, and it's already hard for so many people to get there. So what do? Let's take it down a notch. Are we looking at high school graduates, and are we looking at what are the industry jobs that they can go into, so that by the time that I am a fellow, I mean, just imagine a world where like I'm a fellow, I am in this space, but there is a nursing agency that specifically hires, recruit, retains Black nurses, and that agency has a contract with, you know, the hospital. Now we're talking about actually having the people who have a different level of power and influence and actually can leverage that group to drive some change. So I look at, you know, those are the kind of things that I think about. We really have to think about the model, but if we could create it. So even, you know, we think about there's all these different medical schools, all these different practices, you can have all these different physicians. I think to myself, well, you know, I'd want my doctors to really specialize, and this may sound bad, but in Black health, I'd want them to focus on Black issues if that's my target population. I want them to understand the unique diseases within, you know, these communities that we're trying to serve. So for me, it all starts with education, and it all starts with mobilizing a healthcare workforce that was purposefully planned, you know. And I think that I'll use different for people listening. If I explain that wrong, like or poorly, I really want to put some context on it. So like we look at just traditional jobs such as construction workers and, you know, people who work for the city. Like you look at those as blue collar working class jobs, and some of us may be from places where there are unions, but those jobs are planned. Politicians, like particularly I know on the East Coast where I'm from, like there will be politicians. If you're an Italian politician, you're going to try to make sure that the Italian people from the neighborhood have those jobs, and like it's their thing. And the Irish folks and the German folks, like this is how like America was really built. Like we divided a lot of our, you know, like commerce based on that. And so that's what I want to do in healthcare. Like I want to get to a point where it's like, wow, like it's a thing that, you know, like all nurses are a certain level of nurse, like wow, they're Black, or like all of these people are Black. So again, we have the power and the influence to start doing things, and I could come in on the administrative side and, you know, start to work. But the first thing is I just need a workforce that is actually going to be able to do those things. I think the second thing that we need, and this is a little bit more radical and it's a little bit harder for people to digest, but is some sort of positive disruption specifically for vulnerable communities, which is really difficult. So let's, like in the context of everything we're talking about, right? So 23andMe, that is something that was initially created out of a need. I want to say, I don't want to misspeak, but I know it was a specific group of Jewish folks. I want to say Sephardic Jewish folks and Ashkenazic Jewish folks, but there was a particular disease. The people who created 23andMe were like, yo, there's a particular disease that our people disproportionately are impacted by. We should create something, you know, for that. And the result was 23andMe. completely disrupted how people go about screening for their health, and all of these different kinds of things. You think about something like Peloton, right? Which I think is a stupid idea. I don't understand why. We've had it before. This is not new, but spend however much money you want to spend. But even Peloton, right? Okay, so this is a service. This is something that people can get, to maintain their health, right? And it is targeted to a specific, wealthy, market or consumer base. So what can we do in both of those examples? Where is that for our people? Where is that for other vulnerable people? And how do we actually do that will be able to remove the need for the system? So I would want to create, how do we do things to really make it so that people have to show up to the hospital less and less and less and less and less. And so we're saying a bunch of like public health nerd stuff that we obviously know, but these are just kind of some of the tangible those are the frameworks that I would want future public health professionals to operate out of. It's just number one, mobilizing a workforce, generating more power, more influence so we can leverage that within the healthcare system. But then also the positive disruption for our community. And unfortunately, again, it's all going to have to be under the same business model, unless we're trying to blow everything up. But that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, awesome. And I feel like this is something that we should definitely circle back to and have some more conversations around, because I feel like there's a lot more in there.
For sure.
Yeah. So just to close off talking about your fellowship, what are the biggest benefits that you've gotten from your fellowship thus far?
So, I mean, you really get to do whatever you want to do. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, not only so if you want to do the high speed day-to-day operations, I want to be in the thick of it every single day. That you got that, right? If you want to be more at the system level, really try to understand the strategy, the thought process behind health systems and all the different moves that they make that will impact an individual or community's care, you have that. And if you just want to be a part of a huge corporation in any community and just learn how being an anchor institution in a neighborhood or a city, can shape your work and the opportunities that align with yourself as a public health practitioner, or myself, as a public health practitioner, I was able to do that. I've been able to teach with this fellowship. So I taught a month-long high school summer course. I have been able to work on a policy analysis and actually provided recommendations to amend a policy, which was implemented, affecting over 30,000 employees at my health system. I have been in meetings with people who directly respond to the president, the current president of the United States, which has been interesting. And then, like I said, I understand the kind of the corporate dance now much better than I did, which I think, again, it's important to know as, for me, as I continue to progress, because this will be an environment that I'm still operating in for the foreseeable future. But those are probably the biggest benefits. I really have the ability to, again, like I said, do what I want, create my own schedule. And it's still I always say that it's a perfect space to play in, right? Because I know a lot of people, when they grad school in particular, get that MPH, you want a job, you want money, you want all these different, these things are really important to you. But for me, that was never a worry. After I got my fellowship, it was like, hey, this is good. I have stability for 2 years. I'm going to continue to kind of treat this as if it was grad school and really just want to learn and try my hand at different things. So I think just the flexibility to be able to do so much and also use your position to do even cooler stuff is the biggest benefit from being a fellow.
Yeah, definitely. And what parts of the health system resonates most with you?
Ooh. So for a very long time, it was the ambulatory space. So everything in the outpatient care settings, because again, it's all complex. Inpatient care is trash. It's just way too much for me. I'm just like, okay, it's a lot. And it was also, to be completely honest, when I would be working with care teams in the inpatient setting, equity was like, dude, what are you talking about? It's all about that patient right there, and that's it. In the outpatient setting, you have a much easier time trying to implement any kind of public health practice, because all of the things regarding value-based care, the Affordable Care Act, and how that really changed healthcare, that's all happening in the outpatient space. So that's where I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to come. I thought I was going to be a fellow. I was going to learn, the ambulatory operations of a really large healthcare system, and then I would be good enough to start my own clinics elsewhere after this, and be able to understand the business. But none of that happened. COVID, number one, disrupted my entire fellowship, but also just the need for the organization at the time. So currently, I am actually a product manager within the Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at my health system. And so I would say the DEI space is probably just for now. I didn't want to do that initially. Whole other podcast. But I'm in it now, and I think that it's a great opportunity to be, in these kind of spaces, particularly in healthcare. If leaders are serious about committing to diversity, equity, inclusion, we just have this past year alone to really set a foundation for all the things we do moving forward. So that's kind of my bread and butter right now.
Okay, awesome. And then I know you touched on a couple of different things that you want to do in the future, but where
Yes.
do you like to see yourself in the future?
So very, very so. I want to go back to an HBCU. For me, it's very important. I think that there are very unique things that we could do from those kind of organizations, because most HBCUs are in the hood, number one. So you have the people right there with you. And then number two, again, there's a lot of just cultural things and political things, quite frankly, that you don't have to deal with. Definitely some political things that are different that you got to deal with. They're a little frustrating at times, but that's it. I would like to be an administrator at an HBCU medical school, and also on faculty, and be a part of the public health program there. That way that I can use my public health students to drive research. And from my administrative hat, I can actually implement the research into practice. And it can just be kind of an evolving, growing, body of work that we do. And I eventually want to have it so, imagine if we have a healthcare physician group attached with Morehouse School of Medicine, Morehouse Healthcare. And after I started my fellowship, I thought to myself, man, imagine if Morehouse Healthcare had an administrative fellowship. Imagine if Howard University Hospital or Charles Drew University, like if some of these medical schools had executive management fellowships or these kind of things, if I could bring that experience to us. So that's what I want to do. And that's only midterm, is to be like somewhere in the C-suite administrator role of a medical school, but also a professor. In long term, I think I still want to be, a health commissioner of a city, or a director of a public health, department of a region. I think long term, that's what I definitely want to do. I have a lot of big, hairy goals. Not sure if I'll be able to, accomplish them all or see them through, but those are kind of the two things I see. Those are the two positions, I see myself in.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And I will definitely be there tuning into the journey. And I look forward to just having conversations around all these different topics. I think it's just so important to bounce different ideas off of it, especially we have two different perspectives in just the work that we do. So I think it'll be awesome to just hear what you. So moving along to the last section of the show, the Furious Five. Get 5 questions I ask all guests. Number 1, what advice would you give to a student trying to pursue a career in public health?
That's a good question. I would say actually, the only thing I'm going to say is be patient. Be patient. Be patient. For our generation, things have changed so fast. I mean, I feel like I still remember like the moment where I felt like, oh wow, the world's different. Like this is a little crazy. So we're in classes now where they're trying to teach us how to use social media. Like what? Like we're the generation that created it. So I say be patient, because my thought as a public health student was like, man, the world's moving fast with all this other stuff. So let's move fast when it comes to this, health equity piece now. Like let's just do it. But again, now that I'm a little bit older, only a few years older, I have some experience under my belt, I really can see, whoa, you just got to be patient. You're going to drive yourself crazy if you really have any idea year on year that you're going to save an entire community from whatever. Be patient and honestly have some strategy and just understand that it's a long game. The problems that we're trying to solve have been created over a long period of time and have been sustained over a long period of time. Therefore, it may take, a similar amount of time to actually remedy some of those problems. So just be patient.
Awesome. Number 2, if you're talking to someone wanting to get into your position, what advice would you give them?
In my position, be flexible. Be flexible. And I was a very planned person. But a lot of things, once I started to be as successful, quote unquote, as I guess as I was, those things started to happen. Just like me, just being flexible and being open to new experiences. And you really have to embrace failure. That's probably the biggest thing I'd say, honestly, is just to fail fast. One thing my soccer coach used to tell me, just fail fast, you're going to fail. But this kind of position really requires a lot of humility. And it requires you to also have this weird balance of being confident. And so just embrace it. And when you fail, you fall flat on your face, embrace that, just get back up and, try again after that. But be prepared for that. You're going to fail and be flexible about that.
Awesome. 2.5, what position did you play on the field in soccer football?
So I was a center. I started out as a center defensive mid. But I was like one of the most aggressive people on my team in high school, and I was also one of the fastest. And so and I'm only 5'8", so they slotted me back at center back. And so I could do that for high school. But once I started just like playing recreationally, I was like, okay, I can't do that. So now anytime I step onto the field, I either occupy the DM role or I play right back. I love playing right back. But how about you?
I play like attacking mid mostly.
Okay. Oh, skills.
Yeah. A little bit. I lost most of them though. All right. Thank you. Number 3, what's something you're working on improving in your life right now?
I think that, last year was a lot, particularly with the stuff that was going on this summertime, right? Like all the civil unrest and everything that we just saw all around the world. And I think that, there's a certain mentality that you have to have when you know that you want to be a part of a generation that's going to make true change for your people, sustainable change. And so one thing that I'm actively working on, I have kind of like my library behind me, but you can't see it like in all my books, but I'm really learning on just refining and reshaping my philosophy, my ideology, and my approach to just healing our people. And this is like an active conversation I have with some friends, but that's just like kind of the biggest thing that I'm working on is like, what is my actual ideology? What is my outlook on us, the diasporans, and how we really, can fix this thing, fix the state that we're in right now. So that's probably the thing that I'll be working on for the rest of my life, but I really entered this year, like really focusing on that.
Awesome. Number 4, professionally, do you recommend anything?
Yeah, there's a couple of different good books. There's one book called Unconventional Leadership by I can never say her last name, Nancy Schlichting or something like that. She was the former, I can't say it, but it's Unconventional Leadership. And if you type in Unconventional Leadership Nancy, the book will come up. She was the former CEO of the Henry Ford Health System. She's really cool just to read her. She just talks about, having to turn that system like upside down. It was a turnaround, project, her being the CEO. So it's really insightful. I would also probably say it's a popular book already, but Black Man, White Coat. I think anyone, even if you don't want to be a physician, if you want to get into healthcare, just read it, because everything that, and it's by a pretty well-known physician, Dr. Damon Tweedy. He actually gifted it to me when I was at Duke. His perspective just, it explains so much that all of us experience, whether you're Black, white, man, woman, however you identify, just his experience as a Black, medical student, and how he outlines everything and explains what was happening to him was just beautiful. Really, really enhanced my experience as a healthcare professional in general. And honestly, just gave me a lot of good knowledge.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to definitely put that on my list. Yeah. So
you already got the best list though.
I know. I have too many books to read, man. Too many books. Number 5. Where can people connect with you?
Oh yeah. So definitely through LinkedIn. That's like, professionally speaking, that's like kind of where I put everything. But I also create content on YouTube as well, which is a little different. It's like public health, but not safe for work, so to speak. Rap and get a little flavorful. So that's I'm Blissful Winnie in all my creative endeavors, all my creative platforms. So the word blissful and then Winnie, but WINNIE. But yeah, that's who I am. With LinkedIn, I always, people message me already now. Like, I already reach out all the time, but I try to reach out to everybody to connect, whether it's just to do things like this, like talk and amplify your platform, which I'm so honored to be a guest on, or to actually like kind of show the ropes in terms of the administrative stuff, more specifically administrative fellowship. So LinkedIn, everybody feel free to connect with me. Just hit me up, and then yeah, YouTube, Blissful Winnie. That's kind of my two places, two links I send people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all the insights that you did today. And I know that we're definitely going to have to loop back and have more conversations, hopefully share some of those conversations just around like all these different topics. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking time to be on the podcast tonight.
No, I appreciate it. It was awesome. Amari, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Again, this is an honor. I really feel humbled. I'm going to call my mom and just brag about this now. Because this is awesome.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, man. Well, I'm really glad to have Winston on the show today. He just dropped so many insights about the Black health system experience, being a health administrative fellow, and being Black, and then what that means, and just really finding his path in that, and how he became his own superhero in that. And I just look forward to him continuing to push for this, because I think that as we spoke about in this interview, like, the health system needs to change, and we need to be part of that change somehow. So I look forward to what comes out of this, and thank you all for tuning in. Definitely subscribe, like, leave a review, share with a friend, and I appreciate you all. Until next week, Public Health Millennial out.